All right, welcome back from the break. We're still in the business of looking at issues and making the rounds across the globe and also right here in Nigeria as we look at very salient issues making the rounds. As we told you earlier on that as regards the bilateral ties between Nigeria and the UAE, President Bola Tinubu has invited the United Arab Emirates President Mohammed bin Zayed to visit Nigeria on a courtesy visit, and that was announced today by Bayo Onanuga, and we'll be looking at the implications of that visit and what it means. And moving forward, the Inspector General of Police, IGP Kayode Adeolu Egbetukun, has established the police anti-money laundering unit across the country in strategic move to combat terrorism financing and strengthening national security. The Force Public Relations Officer, ACP Olumuyiwa Adejobi, in a statement said the initiative is aimed to combat financial crimes and prevent illicit financial activities that could undermine the country's stability. The PRO disclosed that the new unit will be led by renowned financial expert CP Hyacinth Azuka Edozie and officers of the rank of the Chief and Superintendent of Police in all states criminal investigation department. He noted that the initiative is a strategic move to strengthen the police role in national security, specifically in combating financial crimes, and also critical in countering sophisticated methods used by terrorist organizations as well as other criminal entities to finance their activities. Adejobi also observed that the establishment underscores the force's commitment to safeguarding national security. And the question is, why are they choosing the soft part of the deal to focus on? And in terms of guarding national security, it's also the police's duty and responsibility to safeguard lives and property. And you're wondering, why are they not going head-on with the terrorists in the different hideouts across the country? All right, so we'll be looking at the different perspective to this move by the Nigerian Police Force. We'll also be looking at the National Assembly, where the National Assembly has increased the revenue target to be generated by the Federal Inland Revenue Service, FIRS, for 2025 to 21.6 trillion naira, while the chairman of the service, Zach Adedeji, was commended for surpassing the benchmark of 19.4 trillion last year, 2024. The performance of the FIRS was reviewed on Wednesday at a session with the Joint Senate House of Representative Committee on Finance, chaired by Senator Sani Musa at the backdrop. For the question is, if the target is increased already, what does this mean to the Nigerian populace? Does it mean Nigerian populace is going to be further taxed, and in order to meet the new revenue target of 21.6 trillion naira, while the chairman of the service for surpassing last year's 19.4 trillion for last year, it means they're doubling the target, and hope this would not mean further pressure on the economy. So we're looking at what this burden is going to be on the FIRS, especially with the fact that Nigeria is also trying to have a tax reform change in its system. And would this succeed, and how long would this furthermore would it go? Already the FIRS boss is said to understudy the template being used in South Africa, which according to him generates revenue from tax collections far above that of Nigeria, despite having a smaller population of about 45 to 54 million people when compared to Nigeria's 200 million population in Nigeria. So the issue is, are they saying that judging by the four tax reforms bill that's already before the National Assembly, are they saying they do not believe in it, that it would yield the required target, or it's going to be another somersault of policies by the Tinubu-led government? So we'll be looking at that keenly. Already we have issues coming out because also commending FIRS for surpassing the projected tax revenue in 2024. We've got the senator from Delta State in the person of Jolentin Thomas from Delta South that says the taxes all over the world is the way to go, and the very reason FIRS must deepen the process through planned reforms. So we'll be looking at how this is going to pan out in the coming days. Then we'll be moving on to the presidency also having some issues with Emir Sanusi because the federal government early this morning told the Emir, His Highness Muhammadu Sanusi II, that he does not need his stamp of approval of what it described as a laudable policies of the government. The government also told the Emir, who was a former governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, to rise above personal interests and partisan undertones to put first the greater good of Nigerians. These admonitions is coming among others who were contained in a statement issued by the Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, in reaction to the recent comments made by the first-class monarch on the economic situation in the country. All right, just for you to know that the Emir at the 21st Memorial Lecture of the Chief Gani Fayoum in Lagos reportedly said that he will not offer any advice to President Bola Tinubu-led federal government on how to tackle economic challenges facing the country. So we'll be looking at why did the Emir make those comments, and why is the presidency also replying with so much venom. Indeed, the contributions of every Nigerian is critical in taking Nigeria out of the wood. So these and other commentaries is what we'll be looking at. Let's go for a quick break. When we return from the break, we'll be having Olubenga George join us via Zoom, and also I'll be having a guest, my colleague in the studio, to help us look at these issues. Stay with us. All right, welcome back from the break. You're still watching The Desk, and I've got my colleague in the studio, Deacon Michael, for us to judge on some of the issues on the desk this evening. Deacon, nice to have you join me.
Always a pleasure, Anthony.
All right, let's just look at briefly going to Gaza. One of the most talked about issues in world politics is the ceasefire reached between the Hamas and the Israeli government. How would you describe this ceasefire? how key it is, especially during the few days to the coming into office of Donald Trump. Do you think this has been fast-tracked because of Donald Trump's impending inauguration? And do you think also on the part of Hamas, they already understands that Donald Trump is one man they would not want to mess around with, and they think this is the right time to seek for peace?
I mean, it was a long time coming when we look at the fact that both the United Nations and the global communities were advocating that there is a need to call for a ceasefire. Looking at the lives that were lost, we were looking at many lives that were held hostage, looking at the number of times humanitarian aids were denied from these countries and all of that. So it was more of what the world were really looking at. So what is happening? So, but a ceasefire, even when Donald Trump had to react yesterday, he said that it looks that the effects is due to his coming back, and they are being inspired to actually reach this agreement. A journalist asked Joe Biden a question just before he finished a press briefing at the White House, and the journalist asked, should we give credit to Donald Trump for this? And he jokingly said, is that a joke? So, where people are acknowledging that, why are you having to come into, intercede, really have to come into this, pressuring this ceasefire at a time where you're just having barely 2 days to exit from office? What happened all of those times where a lot of the international community were calling for Israel? What happened a lot of times where people were saying, allow the humanitarian help, but you never actually had to, see the way of calling for ceasefire. But it's still a good direction, because it also shows the fact that a leader is also coming to terms that he needed to take a decision, and even if it's in the last day, what matters to them, because there are jubilations all over the place, that it looks that there's a freedom already guaranteed for those who have been held hostage, and the war and fight on the crisis of course will be terminated at the meantime.
All right, let's just wrap the conversation up as regards that issue. We know that before this peace deal got to where we are right now, there was the issue of the International Criminal Court issuing the warrant of arrest for Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli Defense Force Top Guns. Do you think this issue is going to still come out after this ceasefire has agreed? Do you think it's going to be jettisoned?
It was a crime. It was a crime against human. It was a crime against what we stood for, what the world stands for.
On whose part? Because
we cannot really the debate
to say Israel committed war crime or genocide. On the part of the Israelis, they will tell you
that they were trying to protect,
denying the fact that it's not genocide. They're simply defending their people, because the attack, October 7 attack, came before there was a reaction.
We condemn, personally, I condemn both actions. The first war attack, Israel's coming back to actually defend the region, to defend all of that. So that's not the condition of the world. When the United Nations were having all of this concerns, I don't really feel, yes, they acknowledge the fact that where do we come from, to get to this place. But away from the issues, can we get peace for once? Life have been lost. You understand the number of young people or humans that have been killed as a result of this. We understand the crisis that have been involved at the cause of all of this war. But where people were really having a concern, the aspect of denying humanitarian aids, was inhuman.
But they say all is fair in war.
But sometimes diplomacy,
the Nigerian
war is not always the end.
Used it against the people of the southeast during the Nigerian Civil War. They used hunger to make the Biafran soldiers.
For how long? At the point where people also had to demand for a ceasefire. At the point where they needed to come to agreement.
We agree all is fair in war.
We acknowledge the fact that war is important, but sometimes there's always an end to war, because war is not always a means to end every crisis. Sometimes you have to drop your guns and come into having an agreement for peace talks. There's a need for diplomacy. So what the world we're advocating for was not necessarily condemning the war, because yes, the crisis has already happened. Sometimes even war is orchestrated because of also to drive home a point. But you made the statements very loud. The world was divided. Some saying Israel are right. Some say so. The way people were advocating for peace wasn't about do we condemn really about the actions of both countries or both regions? But we're only saying allow peace to have a chance,
So
allow people to have access to humanitarian
Are you
aid.
saying at the end of the day, the ICC should withdraw those warrants of arrest?
Absolutely, because this is not the first time when we said, I mean, we've also had, very superior war powers engaging in such violence crisis. Yes, there are those that said this was giving rise to World War III, even when we had Cold Wars and all of that. But in a word, it has been established that these were a fight beyond sentiment. It was really a crisis that once the both parties were trying to also protect their regions. But now that all of that has been established, because you may not blame the Palestinians, you may not actually blame the Israeli as well, because they have ultimately retaliated on both sides.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure.
I am saying at the end of the day, we can't really. Yes, there's a need to blame those who orchestrated,
yes,
who first launched an attack.
Yeah.
And of course, Israel went beyond, more than expected, more than the crisis of the October 7th, to orchestrate more wars and all of that. But at the end of the day, we've established the fact that can we have peace, or can we give peace a chance? Can we allow the humanitarian aid, to come into this region? Can we release those that have been held hostage? Can we actually allow the essence of humanity to have a place in the world? That was what the United Nations and the whole international community were. So this ceasefire is not that Biden is not still taking stand, or he doesn't have the sentiment shared with Israel, but he is only actually acknowledging the fact that there's a need to have peace in the world. So
okay.
that to me.
All right. While we're still looking at that, we've got Olubenga George, who is a diplomatic aide and also is a journalist, joining the conversation via Zoom. He is joining us from Lagos State. Olubenga George, thank you for joining us on the desk this evening.
Thank you for having me. Good evening. Great discussion out there.
As we celebrate the ceasefire between the Israelis and the Palestinian or the Hamas group, I want you to also, let's move on to the next, I will get your take on that. I also want us to move next to the next talking point, which has to do with the African continent, Mozambique specifically, where there's still a protest as regards the disputed elections in Mozambique, where Daniel Chapo has been inaugurated and has been sworn into office as the 5th president of the East African country amidst tight security. Are you impressed with what the route Mozambique is taking, knowing fully well that election is still heavily disputed and there's still protests across Mozambique? Mozambique used to be one of the most peaceful East African nations.
All right, thank you. I think, first of all, we all should celebrate the ceasefire between Israel and Gaza. It's been a long walk to freedom, I must say. Several months of negotiation and all of the diplomatic conversations in between. I also think that it is impressive. What excites me the most is where the negotiations actually snowballed into at the moment. Excuse me.
All right, so
and that's speaking to.
Okay. All right. While he's trying to get himself inside of, let's look at Mozambique. Looking at Mozambique, this is democracy at its worst or at its best, where elections are disputed. The government in power goes ahead to swear in, Daniel Chapo as the 5th president of Mozambique. This brings into mind one of the reforms INEC is trying to implement in Nigeria, where it says election disputes must be resolved before anybody is sworn into office. How key is that policy, if INEC can get it right, and especially using Mozambique as a case study?
It still gets to the point where we're looking at Africa. If we are developing a democratic journey as well, because when we look at those who copy this democracy from, they are fast, still moving on the speed. But in Africa, we are always having interactions concerning about, are we really having democracy in play, or what we are having is a class system, a rule by a class, a certain class of people.
Kind of certain people.
There's a name given to that form of government. So at the end of the day, Africans are not really getting democracy right, because what really matters is the people. if we have processes not duly followed, at the point we're having elections, if we had, people, having to, play on the intelligence of the citizens, having to undermine the process, just be able to, they want to drive home a point. Then you get to the point that we are still in a long walk, to our freedom, entire freedom of democracy, because it gets to the point where these are the things that undermines and actually escalate to political tensions. When people understand that, the will of the people is not guaranteed in an electoral process, in a democracy, it gets to the point where people actually have to take laws into their hands. We've seen what has happened to Burkina Faso. We've seen what has happened in the neighboring countries. We shouldn't fold our hands. Africans shouldn't fold our hands to continue to wait for all of this to be repeated. There's a need to actually swing into action and allow democracy if you want to practice democracy. But if you're not ready for democracy, there's a need to also get to adopt any other form of government. But you cannot hide on the disguise of democracy to orchestrate just a one man or two or cabal system of inauguration. So that inauguration is highly condemnable.
All right, let's get back to Olugbenga George. Olugbenga George, let's get your take as regards what's playing out in the Middle East and also in the eastern part of Africa.
All right, sincere apologies for that. I think what's happening in the Middle East is, where we are right now is a welcome development. A ceasefire must be achieved at all costs to, stem the tide of the loss of human lives, that has been on the repeat for the past 18 months over. Also, we should now, both sides, come to a place of agreement where we say, okay, we are releasing your hostages and all of that. But above all of that, I think while this ceasefire is on, it's an opportunity to also have the final conversation about the Gaza Strip, about what Gaza is going to be after now. Is it going to remain under the territory of Israel, or is it going to remain under the territory of Palestine, or is it going to be a singular state, like a lot of persons across the globe in the global community has called for? Is the two-state system also going to exist where both of them will own it and manage it like it is in some parts of the world? These are issues that we are hoping that this ceasefire will be able to achieve at the end of the day. That's for Gaza and Israel. Now, coming to Africa, I think it is a despicable situation, and it has been on the repeat in Africa year after year after year. And it questions, the democracy that we do claim to practice. You would remember that if you check all the elections that happened in Africa in the last say 3-4 years, we've had a repeat of pseudo militocratic government instead of the so-called democracy that we claim to have. Yes, I say militocratic because what you see is a show of force instead of allowing democratic processes to take its course. You would realize, for example, in the case of Nigeria, that even though it was not militocratic in nature, but you saw a lot of what people called, there's been a lot of English around it, a lot of languages around it, but some people say it is just a bot democracy. It is a monetized democracy. And I believe that politics, especially democracy, isn't about what some people will gain, but it is about what everybody will gain, how everybody is going to live peaceably. And the question that comes to mind, is when you see African leaders force themselves into power, the question you want to ask is, so who do you intend to govern where you forced yourself into power? And that's it. You do not have the cooperation of the people. Most times, even when that government brings out good policies, the people don't support. The case of Mozambique, as we speak, is quite a dicey one. We'll only wait to see, even though the president has been sworn in, and that is why I called it the first time a militocratic approach. It is more of a military in the sense that it is by force. Where democracy, and it is, inimical, to what democracy preaches. Democracy is the government of the people, for the people, and by the people. So it should be proper, a decision that is made by the people to elect who leads them. That is, the tenet of democracy, and that is not happening. And it is not just a Mozambican issue. Before, we used to think that it is perhaps for countries in the western side of Africa, who have embraced democracy. But you see that these issues are Africa-wide. It is not restricted to a region. And like I told somebody earlier today, and I say that it looks like Africa, especially Nigeria, is teaching the world how to play politics. I mean, because the way it used to be like a guerrilla kingdom. We just do what we want and we get away with it. And it looks like in other parts of the world, they are beginning to see that. Bad example, though. But what I'm saying is, it is it is anti-democratic. I mean, to use force in any way to get into power. Politicians should know that the most important thing is that they must be sent by the people if they are to lead the people. If the people don't send you, then you don't go there. You don't have business there. Not try to force yourself to power. And that goes to speak, to why they want to be in power actually. You realize that for most people who want to be in power in Africa, it is just to hold power so that they can use it, for their self-aggrandizing purposes. It's got nothing to do with wanting to develop the state, wanting to bring development, wanting to improve the lives of the people and all of that.
All right, let's end our conversation. Time not our friend. We've got just 3-4 minutes to call it a wrap. Let's just quickly look at the Inspector General of Police saying he's going to set up anti-money laundering units across the states. The big question is the Nigerian police force trying to get their hands soiled in more issues than it has already? Because we've other agencies that have been marked or established to fight, this financial flow of funds in terms of terrorism. Why is the Nigerian police force wanting to create another unit? Do you think that's the right direction to go?
So I'm not a policeman and I do not understand police operations. So sometimes when people who are in a particular field come out to say this is how we think it should be done, I think it might be considered if all the factors are put together. But what is clear about Nigeria is that there are so many organizations that are duplicating each other and yes, and they are just wasting public resources and funds. And it is just employed by politicians, to employ their friends and give them opportunity to chop money, But Nigeria, we have so many institutions. One of the expectations from this administration earlier, though, was that some ministries will be, brought together and will be merged to avoid and double spending in each of those ministries. But instead of that, we even had an increment. So I will not be surprised if, it is the move by the Nigerian police force, if it will be considered. I will not be surprised. But then the question is, how much is that going to impact on combating financial crimes in Nigeria?
All right, that's how much time is going to take us. I want to say thank you for joining us briefly on the desk this evening. Thank you very much, Olugbenga George.
Thank you.
All right, that's how we'll call it a wrap on today's edition of the program. I would deeply apologize for the long breaks due to some technical issues. For joining me on the desk.